Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. Our next guests are featured here every month on the third Thursday of every month in the 11 o'clock hour. Dr. Michele Sherwood is a trained doctor of osteopathy, and Dr. Mark Sherwood is a trained naturopathic doctor. Mark and Michele use an integrated approach that focuses on prevention and lifelong wellness. The Sherwoods have a thriving medical practice, the Functional Medical Institute, and are recognized experts in health and wellness. In their 18 years of practice, they've helped almost 8,000 patients worldwide with an annual reach of 1.3 million. Together, they've authored 3 books: Fork Your Diet, Master the 4 Fundamentals of Good Health, Surviving the Garden of Eden, Surprising Biblical Insights to Enjoy Optimal Wellness, and The Quest for Wellness, a practical and personal wellness plan for optimal health in your body, mind, emotions, and spirit. You can find out more at their website at fmidr.com. Here today to talk about destructive behaviors that derail optimal health in light of COVID-19 are doctors Michele and Mark Sherwood. Mark and Michele, Happy New Year to you, and welcome to Season 5 of Revealing the Truth.
Happy New Year. We're glad to be here. The exciting times ahead of us that we can shine bright, right?
That's exactly right. And go into it with a healthy mind, a healthy body, healthy emotions, and spiritual health, which I think is incredibly important that we strike that balance of wellness, overall wellness in all check marks in every category, because there is an interdependency. You cannot be spiritually well and be an emotional wreck. You can't be Jabba the Hutt and say that you have taken good care of the temple of the Lord. That's just not the case. And things like obesity and the many contributing factors that we've seen in this COVID season of COVID weight gain has been a primary focus for people, that somewhere between 14 and 20 pounds on average during this 11-month period, in which I can honestly say that I've employed your instructions and techniques to maintain ideal, optimal, and that's the word, and you use optimal, and optimum throughout your teachings, that regardless of age, and at 69, I don't exhibit any of the 69-year-old normal blood chemistries or any of the maladies that they're constantly emailing me about, that I need to be screened for this, I need to be screened for that, and I'm going, your screen has holes in it, that's why you call it a screen, and I'm not interested in having you dig around me searching for things that aren't there. So you are seeing, I think, probably an exponential increase in people reaching out to you during this COVID period. Even I've reached out to you for pre-COVID and post-COVID protocols because our Vice President of Programming, Pat Lazito, and his wife Kathy are in day 21, and Pat woke up today for the first time, day 21, for the first time feeling like himself. And
yay, good deal.
21 days of battling the malaise, the painful and labored breathing, the loss of taste, the loss of smell, the high fevers, the very, very painful breathing. Could not take a deep breath without really debilitating pain, just a sharp grab that made you want to not breathe. And those were classic symptoms, and they're 47 years old. And were not exposed to anybody. That's the whole kind of, they might have been exposed to something someone handled, which is what they think happened, because they were visiting with their family, and the family that visited the day before were COVID positive must have touched something, and the virus does survive on surfaces, which is why you need to clean surfaces as well as your own hands. What is it you're seeing in your practice that people are coming to you with, COVID or not COVID related, in this season of COVID response, which I think there's a COVID response syndrome. We're starting to be able to see people's behaviors which have developed in this COVID period, which is sedentary, eating comfort foods, not having the either the ability because their place of working out has been shuttered, haven't developed their own alternative system, whether it's through resistance bands or outdoor walking or whatever it is. They've just kind of put their health on a shelf, saying, okay, I'm not around the super spreaders, so I'm doing all the right things, and yet they're not seeing optimal health and not living their best that they can through this. And so what are you seeing there at the practice?
Well, just a minute ago, it was people were putting on the COVID-19. Then last year it was the COVID-20, and this year now it's COVID-21. Yeah. So definitely more sedentary. People definitely have been putting on the weight. But now, as the new year has begun, people are starting to go, you know what, this thing isn't going away. I've really got to get a hold of my health and my lifestyle because I'm going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, we're seeing people really, as you mentioned, Rabbi Eric, we're seeing people really gravitate to the style of, sort of treatment that we do, which is optimization, a key word there. I think there's a perspective that we all need to take a fresh perspective on. The syndrome idea you mentioned is this, that, people have put on weight, sedentary behavior, fear to go outside, fear to go exercise, fear to be around people. I mean, I get all that. But at the same time, we must understand that those behaviors right there in themselves are going to lower the resiliency of the immune system, just themselves. And then also we know that there is an aspect of the exercise of the immune system. In other words, creating more adaptive immunity. And the only way to get that is to challenge the immune system. So it's a delicate balance between both. Certainly, we're teaching people to not be fear of other persons and not be isolated, because that's not healthy. And we're telling them to be cautious on the other hand. But the overriding theme is we've got to care for self to the point where create better buckets or better depth of that immune resiliency. And we're seeing people really get that right now. I mean, they're coming to us really from all around the world at this point and saying, what can I do? They ask us about, how I can optimize my system, how I can correct a system that wasn't optimized. They've asked us about vaccines. I mean, it's great questions and great dialogue. So we're taking it as a positive step, and people now are more probably aware of the immune system and health than they've ever been in our history. So it's all probably really constructive. It's just that, there's a lot of misinformation out there too. So we're trying to unwind a lot of that.
Let's start with the vaccine, because I'm getting because of this trip that I have planned to Israel. We've indicated that Israel, because it will have every citizen inoculated before Passover, that when they open their borders for tourism, hopefully in April, that they'll be requiring those who are eligible for the vaccine to be vaccinated, and for those that were not eligible to have a certificate that says that they tested negative within 72 hours of travel. Mm-hmm. But if you're over the age of 65, they're just as plugged into what's going on here as we are plugged in going over there, and you refuse the vaccine, then they're considering you to be a danger that you voluntarily are willing to expose yourself to something that could be preventable. I shared with you that I felt the biblical mandate, that it wasn't my personal choice, vaccinate, don't vaccinate. I've never had a flu vaccine in my life. I've never had the flu. But as the shepherd of a group, I felt that the Bible laid an example that the shepherd had to be willing to protect his flock and put himself between danger to protect the flock. We know that when David was a shepherd, he fought a bear, he fought a lion. This is me being a shepherd for the benefit of my flock, that if the shepherd wanders, the sheep scatter. And so if I were to be detained in Germany, detained in Israel, detained in Jordan, detained in Atlanta for that matter, and my sheep go scattered across the world without a leader, that I was not biblically serving them in the model of a shepherd. And so I took it as a biblical mandate for me that as their shepherd, I had no choice but to abide by the pattern in the Bible of what a good shepherd would do. That being said, I didn't do the pros and cons and the ingredients. I had researched them when they first came out, but once it became clear to me that I was mandated biblically to do this, then doors began to open. I actually got up in classification in Alabama that was only doing first-line essential care workers. I got moved up into that category, and I got, because I have a Florida residence, 65 and over, so I went down to Florida and got it right away, the first dose, and in a couple weeks I'll get the second. From your perspective, is there counsel you can give that says that if you fall into this category, you should or should not take it, or here are some of the things to evaluate in taking it? Your position as a medical doctor, Dr. Michele, your position as a homeopathic doctor, Dr. Mark, what counsel are you giving to people in regards to the taking of the COVID-19 vaccine?
Well, certainly it's an extremely complex issue, and there are many, many different opinions on each side. And what we've done is we have tried to gather as much information as we can to indeed do that thing, give good counsel. And again, this is based upon our opinion from our area of expertise and what we know to be true, with the caveat there's probably information out there, highly likely, that we don't know. So this is the best we know right now. So I want to make sure that we are not, offering, good or bad. We're just saying this is what we know. With that said, we know the following. We know that this type of vaccine, the messenger RNA vaccine, has never been done before. I mean, people need to know that. And is it kind of a neat, ingenuitive, great idea? Perhaps. And let's give just a brief background on the sort of mechanism of action. This is kind of cool, right? People need to know this. So, typically a flu vaccine, for example, there's a little bit of the virus that's given along with other ingredients in the vaccine to the human, and the body, once it gets in the system, the immune system is going to respond, both your innate and your adaptive immunity, that's going to respond to this particular inducer. And the body at that point will, based upon what its memory is of being sort of confronted with viruses, is going to do a couple different things. It's going to respond to try to create an antibody to try to remedy the effects of that virus, or maybe, let's say, neutralize it. Couple things happen to people during that particular vaccine. They sometimes might feel symptoms, right? Well, that would make sense if they perhaps didn't develop the response that is expected. Other things that could happen is maybe the strain that was in the vaccine didn't match the strain that they were exposed to, right? So that would mean that they actually got the flu, even though they got the flu shot. So, we all know that about vaccines. They're not a blanket statement to create this blanket immunity forever and ever. That's why you do them every year. This is different. And I'll go forward on that a little bit and then come back. When the past President Trump got sick, he was given monoclonal antibody treatment, which is, how did that get developed? Well, obviously people, got exposed to coronavirus, and through their own innate adaptive immunity, they created an antibody. And the scientists said, well, let's clone the antibody and let's create something that we can go intravenously. So they made these monoclonal antibodies, and that was Regeneron Labs, and they gave it to the President Trump at that time, and of course they worked. And the question at that time was, well, how long are they going to stay in the body? Well, we don't know, right? So they worked, and they were going to be effective, but obviously that's not a practical delivery method for any vaccine, to have everybody walk around sticking needles in their veins, right? So that's not going to work. So let's see, from a scientific perspective, can we develop the genetic recipe for that antibody? And that would be what would be called the messenger RNA. And the way our body works generally is we have our DNA, which is an instruction book of recipes, and then once the immune system says, hey, let's see if we have anything here, guys, to fix this, then you get the recipe from the DNA sent to the messenger RNA to create and assemble this whatever mechanism you're trying to do, like in this case the antibody. So they were able to clone, if you will, the messenger RNA to create the antibody. And again, kind of a neat idea. And so then they insert it into your body. They actually cloak or hide the genetic material with what's called pegylated technology, which is like a sort of a fat pocket, if you will. It's like a fat balloon, that goes in there. And the idea behind that's clear. We don't want to have the body recognize this as foreign material, because then it will respond to it.
Right.
Hence, people are going to have, probably, because the immune system is smarter than any man ever going to figure out, you're going to probably have some allergic reactions to that. I mean, it's probably going to happen. That would make sense, because we're not smarter than God is. And once these get inserted into your genetic strands, clearly there's an alteration effect there. And the idea and hope behind these vaccines is to insert them so that they'll be able to create these antibodies at will to affect the exposure of the coronavirus and perhaps some of its derivatives or some of its other strains. Now, obviously, just like any virus, it's going to change in strains, and we're seeing that already, and that's something to be aware of. So that's not unusual, so don't get alarmed about that. That's supposed to happen. That's happened since the beginning of time with viruses. There are questions, of course, about this type of vaccine, and they would be reasonable questions, I suppose. Number one question is, does it alter in any way your own ability to create on your own antibodies? And frankly, Rabbi Eric, we don't know. Because this has never been done before. I think another question is, could it or does it potentially create the process of too much antibodies? I think that's a reasonable question, and again, we don't know. And I think thirdly, and this is the one that I think people get stuck in, and we don't know the answer, is, does this alteration of DNA get passed on in utero to the next generation? And if so, what does it do? Well, we're not going to find out that. That just doesn't work. So and when your decision tree is, I think you have to really do what you did. You have to look at your role. You have to look at your age. You have to look at your responsibility and your convictions. And this is, again, my personal opinion, and probably our personal opinion, and I'll ask my wife what she thinks about this, is I am more concerned personally, because of what I just said, about the younger person taking it as opposed to the older person taking it. Because we know the older person has just generally speaking, not you, I mean, you're in good shape, but the older person would have a less resilient immune system, and therefore the less ability, to make antibodies effectively. Whereas a younger person, as evidence indicates that young people are not dying, right? We know that. We know athletes are not dying. So the young athletic immune system is showing us by time that it's very resilient and able to adapt accordingly. And we know in our world, especially in the United States, that if a professional athlete died, I mean, literally all hell would break loose. We would hear about that, but we don't see that. We hear about positive testing kids and athletes, but very little death, very little, minimal. So, I'm more concerned about that group getting the vaccine because of the uncertainties than I am about the older group, because I think there's a sort of a cost benefit, asset liabilities, harm, help, risk assessment there. And thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think that's real, very valid, very viable. What we have to think about is, how are we going to establish a global herd immunity? How's that going to happen? Well, a certain amount of people are going to, of course, come down with a virus. They're going to develop antibodies and then become essentially immune for a certain period of time. And then, as we know from history, things like measles, mumps, rubella, smallpox, polio, those killer viruses or things that cause severe health problems lifelong, it took a vaccine. So it didn't go away with just herd immunity. It kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. So the immunization likely to get a hold of it is, like you said, part of shepherding the flock. It's something that we really need to consider, especially with people that have comorbid illness, people that do have that weak immune system, people that really, are traveling overseas and they want to get back in the country and not spend another 14 days outside of the country to quarantine to make sure that they're safe before they come home.
Although mRNA as a delivery mechanism is the first application of it, the chief of a study for the delivery of an RSV vaccine trying to grab a hold of this child killer that has been insidious without really reign. It's a kind of unknown origin, and the treatment is all over the place. The doctor of pharmacology, who happens to be a good friend of mine, headed up that study, and the study studied rmRNA as a delivery mechanism for a trial RSV vaccine. So I had the benefit of being able to talk to her about what it had, the long-term impacts over their study group was of trialing and testing and seeing whether or not there was a residual. There were some rumors that in 8 months, 9 months, you would have a increased susceptibility to things like Guillain-Barré or some other illnesses that you were not subject to, that there was this increased exposure, but she, in her study, debunked all that and said that, and actually the concept behind it is really kind of fascinating. It creates a bubble, and this bubble encapsulates your T cells, your white blood cells, and then kind of creates this almost symbiotic relationship where they create a double bubble. It then kills the vaccine, but forms an super antibody that is like crab-like, and it has these under the microscope. It has then it goes out searching for COVID, for a profile, and it then goes out and grabs a hold of it and sucks the life out of it, and creates this new form of, and under the microscope, under time-lapse photography, it was one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen, because they watched it from the point of injection to efficacy, which was 2 weeks after injection. The first injection, you have about a 50% immunity. After the second injection, 2 weeks later, about a 95.5%. And those are things you have to watch. And still then, you have a concern for other people. So one of the challenges in this is, what are you doing for what are you doing for yourself, and what are you doing for the benefit of others? Mm-hmm. Now, in Israel, they've pioneered a technology for a mask which is 99.35% effective in killing the virus. So if you were to be exposed to it and breathe it, the mask itself is lined with a colloidal silver type of lining, which kills it. So you're not. It's immunizing the air that you're breathing, as opposed to the standard one, which just keeps you from transmitting, or it supposedly contains it. But a bandana does not contain a virus. A standard old examining room mask does not contain the virus. So we've created this idea that masks of any kind, so my Casper the Friendly Ghost mask, well, that's a mask that qualifies, it covers my mouth, I can wear that anywhere. No, there are certain medical things involved in this that are important. So I have, and you need to have more than one mask. You need to be able to wash the mask. You need to be able to swap them out. There's kind of a mask protocol now that we need to start employing, but there's no education on it. It's all self-discovery. I mean, I found a company in Israel that had patented this technology. Now it's being replicated by others to have a mask which will kill the virus. So it's actually a protective mechanism. But I'm 1 week out from receiving the vaccine. I had no response to it whatsoever. I woke up the next morning. If I touched the place of the immunization, it was a little sore, but by the time I had finished lifting my granddaughter 8,000 times into the air, I could touch it now, and all had dissipated because it now had been dispersed. So, if I'm an incubator, any indication of a 69-year-old in good health condition, there was no side effect whatsoever. No change in appetite, no cravings for, fungus or, going out and searching out other viruses and bacteria to consume because I felt a part of the family. So, and it was not stressful. That's the other part of it. Because I had the biblical foundation, feeling that it was a mandate from God, that in obedience, God's not going to punish me when he says obedience is better than sacrifice. Mm-hmm. So it was really a faith walk. But people are stressed, and there are impacts to stress. They're physical, they're emotional, and we need to talk about those because they are destructive behaviors. We're talking with Drs. Michele and Mark Sherwood of the Functional Medical Institute. You can find more about them at fmidr.com. They join us here on the third Thursday of every month at 10 o'clock to talk about wellness, and wellness defined as body, mind, emotion, and spirit. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a little focus on stress, about defining stress, the psychological effects, types of stress, what happens if they're not managed, and some practical things you can do to improve stress response and still maintain health. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, host of Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Revealing Prophecy, seen every week on the Igniting Nation Broadcasting Network. Our daily on-demand programming is available on our Apple and Android apps and on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Android TV. We broadcast live Monday through Friday through our apps on our website, ignitingnation.com, and on Facebook Live. You can listen daily on our audio platforms on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, and iHeart. Our lineup of best-selling authors bring you the most in-depth biblical insights into the most pressing issues of our time, including prophecy, Israel, spiritual warfare, and a wide variety of contemporary Christian issues impacting the body of Messiah around the globe. If you missed the live show, you can always catch up on the Igniting Nation YouTube channel. Follow us on social media and join us as we endeavor to heal the nations with the Word of God.
With today's smartphone technology, news, information, sports, and entertainment is widely available and almost unbounded. But what about the information that believers in Yeshua are looking for? Well, now there's an app for that. Igniting a Nation now has apps available for Android and iPhone. With our app, you'll gain access to everything you would in our website, from our featured guests to our live streaming shows. Visit Google Play or the Apple Store and download Igniting a Nation's new app today.
Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to study right by my side through the Biblical Truth Library. Imagine having access to over 1,000 hours of audio and video teachings available to you through our website on a subscription basis or via our Apple and Android apps on an a la carte basis. Whichever method you choose, we promise to deliver new insights into the living Word of God as seen through the eyes of a Jewish believer. If you hunger and thirst like millions around the world for a deeper walk with God and the revelation of new understanding of the Scriptures, visit ignitingnation.com and click on the Biblical Truth Library or on any device with our free app. Don't let another day go by without receiving your heart's desire for a new depth of understanding into all of God's Word. Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and my special featured guests twice per month with Rabbi Zeb Parat and Carl Gallups, and monthly with Dr. Michael Heiser, Dr. Michael Lake, Dr. Timothy Jennings, Dr. Mark Baker, Dr. Jeffrey Johnson, Drs. Michele and Mark Sherwood, Dr. Kim Moss, Derek Gilbert, Peter Rosenberger, Brandon Gallups, Steve Fair, Stephen Black, for in-depth insights into Israel, prophecy, the unseen realm, the brain, spiritual warfare, overcoming shame, mysteries of the Bible, prophetic insights, the sensational and the supernatural, caregiving, addiction recovery, understanding the divided heart, same-sex attraction, and much more. We're proud to feature some of the greatest biblical minds from both Israel and around the United States. Check out our featured guest lineup and 24/7 feed on ignitingnation.com or watch by topic on any device with our free apps. If you can't find what you need, you're just not looking in the right place. Follow us on social media and download our free apps today. Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and Israel's #1 rated guide, Edo Canaan, for our annual Israel trip. Our 2022 trip is now open for registration for our 18th trip to Israel. Our trip will take us from Tel Aviv to the Galilee, down to the Dead Sea, and 4 nights in Jerusalem. You will walk where Yeshua walked and watch the Bible turn from black and white to living color. Visit ignitingnation.com/events and download the registration form today. No, it's not too early to take advantage of our payment plan designed to fit any budget. All of our trips sell out, and we want you to experience this life-changing journey. Registration is now open for April 2nd to 13th, 2022, and we promise you, you will never read your Bible the same way again. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and as we do on this third Thursday of every month in the 11 o'clock hour, we meet with our good friends, Dr. Michele and Mark Sherwood of the Functional Medical Institute. You can find out more about them at FMIDR as we host this edition of our Wellness Hour, looking at your overall wellness, body, mind, emotions, and of course, spirit. Dr. Mark and Michele, welcome back.
Thank you. Good discussion we got going today. I love it.
You know, the last time we were on, we did talk about cortisol and that is the stress hormone that is the belly fat contributor, and one we kind of touched on when we were talking about wellness in regards to the physiological response, the chemicals that are released that are harmful to overall physical and overall wellness. But there's more to stress than that, and involves the adrenals and some other areas. Take us on a little journey into the anatomy of stress and what the impact is, what releases into our body, so that we can see that the glands that are involved, the brain chemistry which is involved, that sends out many chemicals, more than just cortisol, more than just adrenaline, more than just some of the things we all seem to understand at kind of a entry level. But we're not to live a stress-filled life, and there's a reason for that. And God built our bodies to draw upon stressors in time of need as a powerful tool to be used, but not to live in that state, which becomes self-destructive and actually eats the body. So take us down the road of understanding stress, the causes, and the response, the physiological response, and the spiritual response to stress.
Well, I think we've got to go back to just the way we're created. Our genes have changed 2% in 10,000 years, so we got to start right there. So our responsiveness to life, the stressors, and we'll get into that in a minute, they're the same as if they were 10,000 years ago. So there's not a sort of a translation in our life that determines, this is a good example, between A, am I being chased by a lion that's trying to eat me, or B, fast forward to today, am I concerned about how an election's going to turn out and it's freaking me out? So the body doesn't really respond differently. It responds with the same mechanism, and it can't determine what the original perception of the thing was, because the body responds the same. Now, having said that, stress is good. I mean, there's the autonomic nervous system, there's a stress side, and there's a relaxation side. We need both. There's a reason for both, because we need to be able to do things that are necessary in a stressful mode for survival, which would be like running from the lion, or maybe running towards catching something to eat, or picking up something to build a house, or building a fire and maybe starting a fire. These things are normal for life. To be able to pay attention to a conversation, be engaged in it, writing a document. We need to be able to dot the I's and cross the T's. All of these things require a level of alertness, and that's good. That's a good thing. But we also must have the opposite effect. That is the relaxation side. So the stress side is called the sympathetic nervous system arousal, or SNS. The relaxation side is called the parasympathetic. It's like the old analogy, what goes up must come down. So it's like this balancing act, and we need to learn to balance both. If our ancestors were running from a lion all the time, they would get tired and eventually stop running, and they would get into the freeze mode. They would say, okay, lion, I'm tired, I can't fight you anymore, just do with me what you will. And most people today are stuck in the freeze mode, quite frankly, because they're so maxed out, they're tired of fighting, they don't have anything left in their system. So when we get into the perpetual mode of the exhibition or the synthesis of the stress side, it is debilitating towards our body. It will kill us. And from a reasonable standpoint, it makes very, very good sense. And obviously, we know there's many, many hormones that are there. You mentioned cortisol. We mentioned the adrenaline, which is known as epinephrine and norepinephrine. There's also a dopamine component there. There's the synthesis or lack thereof of sex hormones. So how that works is, if you're running from a bear all the time, or think you are, everything that we have is going to go towards the survival instead of to try to stop on the side of the trail and have sex and have a baby and procreate. So all of your hormone production is going towards cortisol. And what's the backbone of hormones? It is cholesterol. So if your cholesterol is perpetually elevated, could it be because of a chronic stress response? You bet it can. And so we need to really understand all those mechanisms and not just sort of look at things individually. We're all connected, and that's kind of a large overview. But obviously, if we're not finding balance there, we're going to find disease, and that's something we have to really proactively understand. My wife, Dr. Michele, and I, we do take frequent vacations. We do have date nights. Our job's intense, man, and we got to pay attention. We can't make mistakes, right? So we're going to have date nights every Friday night, and nobody gets in the way. We disconnect. We go on trips maybe quarterly because we want to go disconnect. We have to force that happen, and our encouragement for people is to force that to happen. Make it happen, because if you don't make it happen and you don't manage life, I tell you, life will manage you. It will just overtake us because we're so connected today with media and things, and it's a perpetual bombardment of these uncertainties, which uncertainties lead to anxieties. Anxieties lead to fears, and fear is that mystical thing called false evidence appearing real. And so the more we believe it to happen, again, back to our lion versus just unknown perception, is our body's responding like it's being chased by a lion all the time, and no one can survive that. That is interesting because the biblical principle that we find here is the devil roars around like what? A roaring lion. And how do lions attack? They sort of find the weak in the pack, and they'll run them down, and they don't try to overtake them. They'll just run them down until they're tired and give up. And that's fascinating to think about to me. So we need to really stay engaged with this concept of let's call it stress management, what it is, and really augment a strategy to fix it.
Yeah, well, and we know that under chronic stress, a lot of things happen. I mean, what is stress? It's high tension. What happens in the body is then hypertension. Does hypertension necessarily need a medication? No, we need to manage the stress. What about, we've talked about weight gain. Chronic stress creates weight gain because of the adrenal hormones. These things are all spinning out of control. And then if you got chronic cortisol elevation, chronic stress can backdoor produce diabetes, type 2 diabetes, because the sugars are running high all the time because your body is releasing that glycogen from the muscles to produce blood sugar so that you can run, fight, or flee from that bear or whatever it is that is attacking you. We know that chronic stress is one of the biggest gut disruptors. It creates a leaky gut, and then people have irritable bowel, they've got chronic constipation and diarrhea. And does that necessarily need Lamodal or an antidiarrheal or an IBS medication? No, it takes looking upstream at the root to find out what is the cause of that particular problem. And then think about anxiety. Hundreds of people come into the clinic with anxiety on a routine basis. And it's not a lack of an anti-anxiolytic medication. It's actually something that is emotional or spiritual that's upstream causing this reaction called stress. And epinephrine and norepinephrine are aggravating the system, causing anxiety and trembling. So each system, high heart rate, rapid heart rate, we've got dysrhythmia that occurs because stress is out of control. But we don't really manage stress well as general medical practitioners with our patients. We medicate them, and we have to lay out platforms and tools for people to know that it's okay to take a pause break. Mark and I talk about the 1 minute pause, just sitting in silence, no noise, no music, just you and your breath. Close your eyes and breathe for 60 seconds. And just that breath is enough to calm the autonomic nervous system, pull you out of fight or flight, reset the system so that stress can be handled. So those simple tools help us stay away from the medication box and more into the restorative box.
I think one little tidbit of a fact that people should be aware of, the significance of this, is this concept that 3 out of 4 persons in the United States right now are on an antidepressant, and that is not acceptable. I mean, as Dr. Michele said, do we use medications in that way? Absolutely, you sure do. That's proper use, perhaps, if somebody's getting ready to go off the edge. But as far as long term, that is not wisdom, because some of these things have side effects of gaining weight, side effects of pulling out other vitamins and minerals, and therefore you're actually weakening a system over time. So, it all needs to be addressed, and we would really, consider this idea of stress management the key cornerstone piece of lifestyle management.
The Sabbath is obviously what God created to be the de-stressor. It falls exactly where we reach that point where after 6 days we've had enough. We've had enough of the stresses of jobs, pressures, phone calls, emails, whatever. We need a break. God gave us a break. In the pattern of God, He gave us a break. If you take a look at what the New Testament says, it says, "Come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you" what?
Rest.
What's the Hebrew word for rest? Sabbath, Shabbat. It's all neatly. So is that 4th commandment in the New Testament? Yes, in the person of Jesus, He is the Lord of the Sabbath. And so it's not something that's optional. God puts it in His appointed times. Leviticus 23 says, "These are my appointed times," meaning these are not optional. This is required of you. This is where I'll be, what I'll be doing, and what you will be doing while I am doing it. And He starts out with the very first of His commanded Moedim, His appointed times, is the Sabbath. It is not something that's just a convenience. It is a command. It's not only a command in the Leviticus 23, God's appointed times, it's in the 10 commandments. So it's emphasized, re-emphasized. And if you put it on the cross and number the cross 1 through 10, oddly enough, number 4 hits the cross piece. And you think about, well, why? Well, the first 3 are vertical. They're about your relationship with God. 5 through 10 are horizontal, your relationship with man. On that horizontal cross piece, split in 2, is half of it is your relationship with God. I can't maintain a relationship with God unless I'm obedient to God and I spend time with Him. And I can't decompress and prepare myself for re-entry if I don't exit. And actually, I used to talk about, and we have a service in Judaism called Havdalah, which is at the end of the Sabbath, where we extinguish the Sabbath candle, and we talk about moving from the clean to the profane, back into what I called re-entry. Okay, so now are you prepared to re-enter? If you have not used the Sabbath for the recharging, the refreshing, the renewing, then you're not capable of re-entering. You're only going to be compounding the stressors. You haven't had that release valve. I just went on a road trip, and my car tells me your car tires, you check your tires. So I check my tires, and I have this portable inflator, and I would overinflate it and say, you release, so if you don't release it, it's going to explode. So you go back and you take some air out of it to make sure that it's of the proper balance. Well, that's us. We get pumped up, and the Lord says, if you read my inner lining, it's I'm supposed to be at 33 pounds per square inch of pressure. If I go to 39 pounds, well, then I have high blood pressure and I have cardiovascular problems. And if I go too low, I'm lethargic and I'm not functional, and I'm all of a sudden exhibiting all kinds of adrenal failure so I have to maintain a balance. And
Yep.
that's the message of the Word of God, is that a false balance is an abomination to God. He uses it for weights and measures, but he also uses a larger message in our lives that you got to have a balanced life. You know, you remember the last time I said to you, listen, I like chocolate. Right? And your response was, okay, so eat chocolate. Right? So here you're this nutritionist, and your answer is, so what? You like chocolate? Eat chocolate. Right? Don't eat a box of chocolate. Don't eat, a 5-pound bar of chocolate at one time. It might not be lifetime harmful for you, but the next day you're not going to feel good. I've done that in my life. I don't feel good. But why deprive yourself? Balance. Find a balance. Find something that there's healthy chocolate out there. There's things you can do to do that. And they help to de-stress you when you don't. I think deprivation is a stress factor.
You bet you it is. I agree with that. We talk about that all the time. We don't even allow people to use the word diet in here because
it's not food prison.
Yeah, the concept is deprivation, and that's not God. God's abundance, man. He's just, you can do anything you want to do. Find your lane, find your rhythm. We don't restrict anybody here in our teaching of food. We say, you want to do that, but just know what you're doing and have an awareness of that. And to tag on what you said, I thought this was a beautiful explanation of balance. We're in a war every day. It's really a spiritual war, and you can't engage in a battle. You're not ready to fight. You're not ready to stand up. You're not even ready to put your spiritual armor on until you're ready to re-engage. And if you're not ready to re-engage, you need to rest because you're not capable. And I think that's a brilliant explanation you put out there. And it's the spiritual principles interline perfectly with emotional principles, perfectly with spiritual principles or physical principles. And that's why what we're doing here, the three of us in this program, is we're talking about how to live truly that abundant life that is talked about. And this is key. It's not about a diet. It's just about learning to find the rhythm of life and exist in a fruitful, bountiful, abundant manner to create influence to bring people back to our Savior.
Hebrew is a phonetic language, and when I hear you say the word diet, I hear you say diet.
Diet. I like that.
Diet.
Well,
okay.
my wife takes the T off. When you take the T off?
Yeah. The first three letters of the word diet are D-I-E. And when you go on a diet, in about 3 days, that's what you feel like. You feel like you're going to die. You feel that deprivation, the emotional attachments, all those things start reeling back in there. So we never use that word.
No. And, I don't know where you stand on fasting, but I just think that it's a misnomer because it always goes so slow. So, there you have it. We've been talking with Doctors Mark and Michele Sherwood, as we do on the third Thursday of every month for this Wellness Hour at the 11 o'clock hour. You can find more about them at fmidr.com. If you're interested in the books, click on Love the Interview, get the book. We'll take you to a link to all three of their books. I strongly recommend you go to their website, subscribe to their podcast. Dr. Mark has something going on all the time, a message, and your body is your friend and not your enemy. You should not be at war with yourself. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And you can find optimal health at any age, and it does not require anything but a little bit of discipline, a little bit of focus, and some smart choices and some good friends to help guide you along the way. Dr. Mark and Michele, you are those good friends to me, and I thank you for being a part of everything we do here at Revealing the Truth and trying to make a healthy body so we can stand up against and fight the battle we are called to do as warriors for the kingdom, and not being in the infirmary, but being on the front lines. God bless you both.
God bless you too. We love you. Thanks for having us.
All right, thanks. Shalom, shalom. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.